to the stream, those of you who are there. I am Jack Stockwell, and we'll be here for an hour this morning, trying to pick up where we left off and keep this program going. As the, I don't know how to describe it. The madness, the insanity continues. Parts of the world seem to have a good grip on what's going on. The other parts of the world, like us, ever dropping back further into the dark shadows. China has pretty much put the Trump visit in its rear view mirror. And I'm going to talk about everything, but I want to start off with what's going on there because they are now focusing. China's now focusing like a laser beam on President Vladimir Putin's visit. And in a briefing about the upcoming event, Yushakov, the presidential advisor Yushakov, indicated that President Putin would not be writing an article prior to his visit, as was the tradition, but would be making a video address to the Chinese people. He also made clear that the visit had no connection with Trump, nor Trump's visit to Beijing, as the Putin visit has been arranged in February prior to any announcement of Trump's visit to China. So in other words, Putin's visit this week to China had nothing to do with Trump's visit. So I'm quoting from Yushakov now. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping will discuss the most sensitive aspects of their bilateral agenda at Russian-Chinese talks, which will be held in both narrow and expanded formats. The delegation will include 5 deputy prime ministers, 8 ministers, central bank governor Elvira Nabiullina, heads of news agencies, major state corporations and banks, and rectors of the several universities. A total of 39 people will. Now, you just heard the description of the people who are coming with Putin. Remember who came with Trump? Elon Musk, what's his name, the head of Apple, business people. Not just business people. Some of the richest people on the face of the planet. Here, you've got everything coming with Putin. So this, I'm quoting from Yushakov. The deputy prime ministers will report on their respective areas of work, preparations for regular meetings of heads of government, investment cooperation, energy, humanitarian ties, and the development of China's Far East and Northeast. Then the two countries' foreign ministers, Sergei Lavrov and Wang Yi, will discuss foreign policy cooperation. It's a little different meeting this time. The two sides are going to sign as many as 40 documents of cooperation in 40 different areas. Hydrocarbons are going to be discussed, as well as the long-planned power of Siberia, too. So Yushakov said this. This topic will be discussed in great detail, this Yushakov, or the Siberia 2. It's on the agenda, and we are committed to a serious discussion on this matter. I won't get ahead of myself as to what will be signed. But he said that the Chinese and the Russian positions on foreign policy issues are often not just close, they are completely aligned. So he said the trade between the two countries is almost entirely denoted now in rubles and yuan, outside the petrodollar. The two sides will be signing 40 documents in cooperation of various areas, and after the larger formal meetings, Putin is going to discuss key issues over tea. Yushakov indicated that this meeting, with only 4 people from each country, will be the most important part of the visit. So after all the major stuff that all these other people in the entourage will be involved with, it comes down to the most important meeting, I suspect behind closed doors. Russia's top 4 and Chinese top 4. discussing what they're going to do, I suspect, with Iran, with Israel, and with the United States. That's a meeting you would like to attend if you could at all. Well, I was expecting the war to break out again today and gasoline to go up another $1 a gallon. But President Trump has announced on Truth Social early this morning that he had canceled a planned attack. No, I guess it was yesterday afternoon he announced it. A planned attack on Iran today at the request of the Emir of Qatar, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, bin Salman, and the President of the UAE, Al Nahyan. Why? Because these countries, we suspect, told President Trump, you cannot use our airspace. And why? For obvious reasons, of course. Iran said if you let them use your airspace to launch these drones and launch these rockets and launch these aircraft, there will be nothing left of you. We've given you fair warning. We've attacked you because of this before. If you allow them to use your airspace, it's all over. So he noted that they had indicated that in these serious negotiations, quoting, now taking place, and that in their opinion, as great leaders and allies, a deal will be made which will be very acceptable to the United States as well as all countries in the Middle East and beyond. That's President Trump on Truth Social. Now, prior to this, President Trump had made a phone call to an Israeli journalist, Barak Ravid at Axios, to tell him that the clock is ticking for Iran, and warned that if the Iranian regime didn't come with a better offer for a deal, they're going to get hit much harder. Now, I don't know if you keep listening, if you follow Truth Social, or if you follow all of these reports that are going deeper than what Truth Social is talking about, like Axios. It's like a tennis match. Back and forth, back and forth. Rancid said this: Trump is expected to convene his top national security team in the Situation Room on Tuesday to discuss military options, two U.S. officials said. Now imagine you're in this room, the Situation Room, deciding on what to do, and these three countries that house a lot of bases and have made it possible for you to have this war of aggression against Iran, now telling you you cannot use their airspace. What options do you have left? Now just let that sit there for a minute and think about it. Now, he said that Trump spoke May 17th with Prime Minister Netanyahu about the situation in Iran and met on May 16th with members of his national security team at his Virginia Golf Club to discuss Iran. J.D. Vance was there, Witkoff was there, Rubio was there, John Ratcliffe of the CIA was there. And at the same time, a new U.S. proposal was reportedly sent to Iran containing 5 points. And it seems that FARS, F-A-R-S, FARS News was the first to circulate it, which of course would be rejected by Tehran. Number one, the U.S. will not pay any damage compensation to Iran. Number two, transfer of the enriched uranium to the United States. Number three, only one nuclear facility will remain operational inside of Iran. And remember, a lot of their power, the electricity for their 94 million people, come from these small nuclear power plants all over the country. Less than a quarter of Iran's frozen assets will be released, and the cessation of war on all fronts is conditional on holding negotiations in Islamabad. Now, if you've been following this since February 28th, and on the morning of February 28th, the Straits of Hormuz was open to everybody, has always been, For the 47 years that Iran has been in a theocracy, it's been open to everybody. I mean, we could have gone over there and rented a weekend party boat, a big catamaran with 40 or 50 of all of us on the boat, picnicking up around the Strait of Hormuz, and not be interrupted, not be interdicted, not be fired upon. And now here we are, months later, after the war of aggression has begun, and it's closed down. It's not only closed down, we can't open it up. Two of our warships were just fired upon yesterday as they got too close to the opening of the strait. They turned tail and ran. I mean, if I was a commander of one of those warships, I would have turned around in a hurry. In fact, I would have seriously questioned the logic or the intent behind going into the strait anyway. So essentially, this war is over with. They have complete control of the strait, and now they're charging money to get through. They're not charging ships that are friendly to Iran in the sense that they're carrying oil to China. But they're charging a lot of the others. And they won't let any ships go through that are friendly to the U.S. and Israel. So who's won? And then for the United States to send these 5 points in order to stop the war, the U.S. is not going, I'm going to repeat them, the U.S. is not going to pay for any damage that they've done. All enriched uranium is to be transferred to the United States. Now, I just want you to imagine the government of Iran, the military leaders, the religious leaders, the people themselves, hearing these 5 points to avoid further attacks. Now, further attacks would involve carpet bombing by B-52s, precision bombing by B-2s, more missiles, more drones that could wreak a lot more havoc on Iran. No doubt about it. Iran doesn't want this to go on any longer. Anybody else does. But imagine being a part of the government, part of the military, part of the private sector, and hearing this come from people who can't force you to open the Strait of Hormuz. We're not going to pay for the billions of dollars of damage we've done. You're going to give us all of your enriched uranium. We will let you have one nuclear facility. We will let you have one nuclear facility. Of all of the billions of your money that are frozen in Western banks, we'll let you have 25% of them. And you will cease any further attacks on all fronts. I mean, the effrontery. So according to Wall Street reporter Lawrence Norman, an alternative U.S. proposal would give Iran access to over $25 billion in frozen funds, letting them keep their nuclear enrichment capability intact. Oh, my goodness. So you remember General Flynn, President Trump's former national security advisor. He's no longer a part of the Trump administration, but he still carries some weight within the MAGA networks. And therefore, with the circles around President Trump, he still has some influence. And so in his blog here the other day, he warns the president that he now has to deal primarily with the questions most affecting Americans, the inflation, and the economy. And if he's to have any chance of success, in the upcoming primaries. General Flynn also said the growing disenchantment among the Trump base with any further military action with Iran must be confronted. So his advice to the president was this: declare victory with a ceasefire combined with some sanctions relief, establish some type of regional alliance, perhaps based on the Abraham Accords, to stabilize the situation and de-escalate with defined lines of operation to preserve a sustained deterrence posture. Declare victory. Now, pragmatist as he is, and still much too supportive of President Trump's Make America Great Again agenda, Flynn is ignoring the underlying reality of the situation here. Without an economic development policy, all the short-term options are only going to delay the onset of a new conflict down the road. You can't just stop the battle without economic development behind it, like the Oasis plan, the very thing that's being proffered for Gaza. You can't just stop bombing and killing these people and then walk away from it and throw them a few $1 billion and walk away from it. You have to go in and establish not just a security, but an economic development policy that's beneficial to all. We left that out of the discussion. So anyway, not satisfied with threatening to wipe out Iran if it doesn't capitulate to the president's demands, the White House, again using Axios as its leak sheet, is now retailing the ridiculous claim that Cuba is a military drone threat to the United States. This is from Axios. Quote, Cuba has acquired more than 300 military drones and recently began discussing plans to use them to attack the United States base at Guantanamo Bay, at U.S. military vessels at sea, and possibly Key West, Florida, 90 miles north of Havana, according to this classified intelligence shared with Axios. So the Axios reporter, Mark Caputo, wrote this yesterday afternoon, quote, the intelligence, which could become a pretext for U.S. military action, shows the degree to which the Trump administration sees Cuba as a threat because of developments in drone warfare and the presence of Iranian military advisors in Havana. Iranian military advisors in Havana, a senior U.S. official said. So Caputo quotes the official saying this: when we think about those types of technologies being that close, and a range of bad actors from terror groups to drug cartels to Iranians to the Russians, it's a concerning, growing threat. Then Caputo also covers Cuba's response, as was posted on X. Quote, like any country, Cuba has the right to defend itself against external aggression. It is called self-defense and is protected by international law and the UN Charter. So the Cuban embassy in the United States said this in a statement that was posted on X. Those from the U.S. who seek the submission and, in fact, the destruction of the Cuban nation through military aggression and war do not waste a single moment fabricating pretexts, creating and spreading falsehoods, and distorting as extraordinary the logical preparation required to face a potential aggression. So there was this political cartoon that was put out by the Iranian press. It showed President Trump looking at a map of the Middle East. And he's kind of looking all over the map, saying, where's Cuba? Where's Cuba? Well, anyway, I think it's very clear that mankind stands at an absolute crossroad this morning, where the two different directions in which we can decide to bring history has never been more clear. One is leading to the potential catastrophe for all of humanity. The other one is leading to a new paradigm of cooperation and getting adulthood to rule in the affairs of mankind. Now, unfortunately, the adults in the room are not yet in a leading position, at least not visibly so, because after the actual potentiality of this hopeful meeting between President Trump and Xi Jinping, which did, at least for the time being, bring in some element of stability and potential elimination of the largest conflict in the strategic situation, namely the one between the United States and China. That, however, was immediately attacked by the leading elements of the forces of war, especially here in our country, and this was manifested itself in a telephone call which Trump did on Sunday with Prime Minister Netanyahu, his boss, and that led to a situation where Trump basically said in a phone call to Axios that the clock is ticking for Iran. And then if the Iranian regime does not come with a better offer for the deal, they're going to get hit much harder. What do you say? I mean, basically, according to this Axios article, U.S. officials are saying that Trump wants a deal to end the war, but Iran's rejection of many of his demands and refusal to make meaningful concessions on its nuclear program has put the military option back on the table. So this morning, I suspect it's going on right now in the Trump meeting with his top national security team in the Situation Room, are discussing these military options. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that and what Axios may be reporting this afternoon from this meeting. And the major things that they have to deal with, we don't know for sure, but it seems very obvious that Saudi Arabia and the UAE and the other one, slipped my mind for a moment, have told President Trump, you cannot use our airspace. And why did they say that? Because what Iran told them. Iran has said, look what we've already done to your country. Look how specific the missile attack has been. And you haven't even seen the biggest, baddest missiles we have. So you will not allow the United States to use your airspace, or you'll get hit much harder. So Trump, as I said earlier, met Sunday with members of his national security team at the Virginia Golf Club. Trump says, well, we want to make a deal. They're not where we want them to be. They're going to have to get there or they're going to get hit badly, and they don't want that. He said the U.S. is going to hit Iran much harder if they don't come up with a better proposal. He said the clock is ticking. They better get moving fast or they're not going to have anything left. This kind of hyperbole that keeps coming out of his mouth. And then all of a sudden he says, well, we're not going to attack Tuesday. Let's give them these 5 points. And of course, the 5 points will not only be rejected, they're going to be laughed at before they even get them out of their mouth. So this is, unfortunately, back to the old barbaric tone after Trump had for 2 days with his trip to China, actually used almost diplomatic language, and remained within the frame of civilized behavior, but that was immediately nixed, apparently by his phone call with Netanyahu. Then his whole demeanor, his speech, everything changed after that. Prior to the call with Netanyahu Sunday night, he had an awful lot of good things to say, and it was almost not eloquent, but a lot better than this barbaric tone that he comes up with. And then after his discussion with Netanyahu, this civilized behavior went right out the window. So the U.S. part that's offered to Iran, which they obviously don't like, as I've said before, is that the U.S. is not going to pay any damage compensation to Iran. And then there has to be a transfer of the enriched uranium to the United States. Only one nuclear facility will remain operational, and that less than a quarter of Iran's frozen assets will be released. And fifth, the cessation of war on all fronts will immediately be in effect, up through the coming meetings in Islamabad. Well, obviously, every point here is unacceptable to the Iranians. So the Iranian foreign minister, Agrachi, had a meeting with the South Korean foreign minister, where he demanded that the U.S. and Israel must be held accountable by the international community for their acts of aggression against Iran and the subsequent insecurity that exists now in the Persian Gulf, which naturally, of course, the United States does not agree with. And the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, Ghalibaf, very interestingly said that the U.S. presence in the region had brought instability and insecurity to the region rather than what many countries had been hoping for, and that the way to create such conditions of regional security would be to build trust and cooperation among themselves and pave the way for the creation and expansion of economic ties, as well as political and security cooperation. And we see this in the statements by Ghalibaf, making it very clear what the Iranians want. So Ghalibaf said that the formulation by President Xi Jinping that the world is in a transformation not seen in a century, and that the Iranian resistance had accelerated this transformation, and that the future belongs to the global South. So I think that's a very interesting thing to be saying. Now, unfortunately, Trump is not off the warpath. He's not satisfied with creating havoc in Iran. He's now finding new reasons to threaten Cuba. And this was again leaked by Axios, where Axios said that Cuba has acquired more than 300 military drones, several of which could reach Key West. Well, if they could reach Key West, they could probably reach Miami. But that's not the issue. This whole thing is ridiculous. This whole idea of keeping the warfare talk, the war drums beating in the background, by moving the attention of the world, at least those that are interested, away from the failure of the Iran war and to start going after poor old Cuba, old Raul, Fidel's younger brother, was there with him in the revolution back in the 50s, all the way through. Apparently, Raul Castro is about 95. And now we're threatening Cuba with this ridiculous story that they have 300 military drones. And we just, it's back to 1961. 62, and the rockets we suddenly discovered in the Cuba highlands. I mean, in any case, if this new military attack does go on against Iran, it is going to be absolutely horrible, more than ever before, because of what Iran is capable of doing with 90% of their missile force still intact. And again, they have said the monster of all monster rockets is still buried under the desert, and that they haven't seen these things used yet. But remember, this was going on ever since the overthrow of the Shah, and the Iranian people, whether under their religious theocracy or not, realized there was no more trusting of the West, and they knew what would be coming as a result of this revolutionary overthrow of this fascist regime and the secret police, the horrors of their secret police, that they went underground and they start building tunnels, miles of tunnels for 47. How much of this can you do in 47 years? And the development of missiles and missile technology. Where do you think they got that technology? Yeah, from the Russians, from the Chinese. And they built these missiles, and they have warehouses underground. Almost cities, not quite cities, but huge supply areas underground, hardened underground. And so if this new military attack, that apparently they're in a situation room right now, talking about why they shouldn't do it, and depending on who's present, why they should do it, this is going to require a lot of special forces, of which many have been amassed in the region already, as we know. Tens of thousands of American service people in the area, most of them up in Kuwait, getting ready to invade. But it would require all kinds of backup and the need of thousands of support troops, which would attempt to create a security parameter and then be drawn into combat with Iranian troops. So this would obviously risk lots and lots of casualties, dead soldiers coming back in body bags, and be a bloody disaster. Now, I think it's noteworthy that Panetta, the previous CIA director under Obama, basically said that he thinks the war can go on, will continue for months, and that Trump has very few options in any case if they start this back up and go for it. This has been expressed by many commentators who express worry that if the war resumes, it could go on for many months. And what that would do to the world economy, everybody could imagine. It would be for sure sending shockwaves into the world economy, leading to global depression, chaos, and other horrible, terrible things coming out of that. Disease, famine, pestilence, starvation, and revolutionary upset. So I hope there's an adult in that room, in the Situation Room this morning, who are bringing these points up. Now, President Trump, just declare victory, pull your troops out and go home. Maybe you can save something more than what Thomas Massie is going to lose today, unfortunately. I think it's quite noteworthy that she, what really is coming into play here a little bit is what Pope Leo the 14th had said when he denounced military spending in war, because the Pope is one of the absolute important voices out there for sanity, for peace, and not so much because of the Pope, because the Pope is already doing everything that he can. You just have to use the fact that the Pope has such a clear stance on the issue of war to wake up other people, especially in the Catholic Church, where they're not on course, like in Germany, for example, or Spain and other places. They're so caught up in their own political divide, they're not listening to their own Pope, and they're pushing for war. So when you look at the dynamics here, the various forces, the things that are facing all of us at this point, it's time for some sensibility and sanity to sit down and start having some real talks. Even Merz, the Chancellor of Germany, has hinted that it might be time for Germany to sit down and talk to Russia, because these people surely see the writing on the wall. And with all of this destruction that's been happening inside the Russian border, from all of these drones and missiles, many of them, most of them, now being assembled outside of the Ukraine and delivered to the Ukraine to be fired, is putting all these other nations in serious trouble. And Lavrov, the warnings coming out of Lavrov the other day, you had better stop. There are those who are predicting the next backlash from Russia for all of these red lines that have been crossed is going to be absolutely enormous, to the point where people around the planet will be saying, who put the, bee in Russia's bonnet? What's happened to Russia that they're acting like this? Well, they've had it. And the Iranians have had it. And it all comes down to the power that Netanyahu has over President Trump. What does he have on President Trump? I mean, if you look at the rest of the world, you can see that it's the only reasonable approach is to bring these people together and sit down and talk. Because all the rest of the world is not ganging up, but becoming awfully clear in their opposition to Netanyahu. And in Europe, you have the same insane militarization mode. The general inspector of the German army, who was just in Washington, is continuously arguing this stupid line that NATO has to be prepared, that Russia is going to attack Europe somewhere at the latest in 2029. And he made a joint interview with the British Air Chief Marshal Richard Knighton, in an interview where he's again repeating the same line. And he also said the same thing at the Day of Catholics in Würzburg. That's the annual celebration of the Catholic Church. And he said, 2029 does not mean that the attack will take place, but it could take place. And he said that it's clear that Russia is preparing for this. Russia has no intention of attacking Europe. They don't need to. Russia's better off now than when the war started, because people are buying their oil and gas at accelerated prices. So when you have all the provocations and the crossing of red lines by the West with Ukraine into the territory of Russia, we shouldn't be surprised that Russia is indeed preparing itself militarily. So it's a complete turning upside down of cause and effect. And then when you have these insane people like Kiesewetter, who topped Pistorius in his war-ready nonsense by saying that we have to demand total capitulation of Russia, just like the Nazi regime did in 1945. Because only if Russia is completely unconditionally surrendering can we reintegrate into the world community. I mean, these people are in a different universe. So at the same time, the Catholic Day celebration in Würzburg, Merz was booed by various people for various reasons, but it's interesting that their chancellor was booed, just as President Trump has been booed in several public gatherings, like at the UPC thing. Now, the argument that all this rearmament is necessary because it would lead to economic recovery is again completely insane. So interestingly enough, the German representation, the German Institute for Accounting, is completely criticizing that it said that if they go ahead with plans for the rearmament as it now stands by 2029, the interest rates will be 12% of the entire budget. Every eighth euro would go into financing the military debt, together with the debt from the pandemic that they're still suffering from. And it would completely curb any room for any further future investment and basically be a burden on the generations to come. This is the power of the military industrial complex around the world, not just here in this country. But they've got Germany by the short hairs. So there is a continuous retooling of German industry into war production right now. Not tractors that the German people, farmers, have been calling for, but now Mercedes-Benz has stopped making certain cars and is making military equipment, military trucks. France has just ordered 7,000 off-road Zetros trucks, maybe Zetros trucks. It's an all-wheel drive 6-ton truck for Mercedes-Benz, and they have entered into a partnership with a German drone manufacturer, Quantum Systems. And so that, unfortunately, is going on. Then on the other side, in Italy, where there's a military trade union, which is between 200,000 and 300,000 members, has called for the national transport strike today to protest against the Israeli handling of the Sumud flotilla and against the war generally. So that's, at least that's something useful. Then the CEO of Mercedes-Benz, a 56-year-old Swedish-German person called Ola Kallenhuis, is basically saying that the world situation has become incalculable. So therefore, we have to build up our defense capability. This is like 1930s. And I could go into several more things. The German Verfassungsschutz is now not buying Palantir from Peter Thiel, but from a French alternative, whose name I don't have here in front of me at the moment. But in any case, they're buying the same military spy equipment or data compilation equipment from a French firm because they are militarizing. And what can you expect from Germany when they militarize? And now another argument made when Trump announced that the 5,000 troops are being pulled out of Germany, probably to Poland or somewhere else, or in any case, that would be a big hit on the German economy because the national businesses and so forth. But it's also obviously completely BS because mainly the jobs created by these people in Germany are in the low income sector, so it's completely negligible. And the discussion of European nuclear weapons is still going on, which can't possibly be positive. So a recent poll in Germany, 84% of the population don't like what's going on. That's a higher percentage than what's going on in this country. I think we're still in the 60% range somewhere. Haven't hit 70 yet. But they're in the backyard of what's going on between NATO and Russia. And Russia now has pretty well acknowledged the fact that their war isn't against Ukraine. Their war is against NATO. So it just continues to, well, we've got our own little wars here in this country. And the big one today is in Kentucky, of course. And the future viability of the Trump coalition is on the line when votes are cast today to choose the nominee at the Republican primary in the 4th Congressional District of Kentucky. And you have been following this. You know that the incumbent is Thomas Massie, who was first elected to Congress as a traditional conservative Republican in 2012. And Massie had been a loyal Trump supporter during the president's first term, committed to the idea behind Trump's MAGA movement. MAGA opposed the permanent wars supported by the presidents of both parties, arguing that the procession of wars served no American interests, wasting American taxpayer dollars and American lives. So Trump campaigned in 2016, and again, of course, in 2024, as the anti-war candidate. Well, that changed. And Trump is continuing to provide weapons and money to Ukraine and Israel. Massey objected to this, as did an increasing proportion of Trump supporters, leading to a drive against the war. Now, while Trump made some minimal efforts to cut off Ukraine, he not only increased the funds of weapons flowing to Israel, since he stopped them going to the Ukraine, he became a partner of Greater Israel, Eretz Israel, and a hand in vest, hand in pocket partner of Netanyahu in launching this war against Iran in violation of the War Powers Act, which requires congressional approval to engage in war. We all know that. Massey not only objected to Trump's support for the Zionist extremist ethnic cleansing in Gaza, but to the Zionist lobby, which provides funds and weapons and political cover to the Greater Israel fanatics, like our ambassador to Israel. So Massey joined with Democrat Ro Khanna to challenge the funding of the war. And so more threatening to the pro-war American Zionists was their campaign to expose the role of the Trump Justice Department in covering up the penetration of the Epstein-class operatives in the defense, security, and intelligence agencies. And so the introduction by Massey and Khanna of the Epstein Transparency Bill, along with his opposition to Trump's big, beautiful budget bill, and his battle to expose the corrupting influence of the Zionist lobby, AIPAC efforts, provoked Trump to recruit an opponent to defeat Massey in the primary election. That should tell you all you need to know about President Trump's promises 2 years ago in his campaigning, and it's just disgusting. In the embodiment of dead Gowrine to defeat, he's a former Navy SEAL. Trump announced his choice in October of 2025 of this former Navy SEAL, Ed Gowrine, to defeat Massey. And the money flowed in to defeat Massey at record levels, led by 3 Zionist billionaires, Miriam Edelson, Paul Singer, and John Paulson, whose MAGA Kentucky PAC provided Gowrine's campaign with more than $15.5 million from Zionist donors. So if Gowrine wins the primary against Massey, he'll be elected this fall for sure in a traditional Republican district of Kentucky. And now you'll end up with another hardcore Zionist as a member of the House of Representatives. And yet, even with this massive cash flow, the polls are showing that there is a divide in the Trump base, and the dividing line is the role of the Zionist lobby in backing Trump's war. So Massey escalated the fight by introducing the bill, which would force AIPAC to register under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, which would identify those attacking Massey and other anti-war candidates as agents of a foreign power. So over the weekend, an additional $3 million was contributed by the Zionists to the Gowrine campaign, leading Massey to say that this is an absolute sign of desperation, which has been fed by the failure of Trump to deliver any of the goals he identified as the object of his and Netanyahu's war against Iran. So in his continuing commitment to losing the war against Iran, his reliance on the anti-MAGA neocons to defeat the MAGA anti-war forces in the Republican Party, like Massey, and his defense of the special relationship praised by his recent guest of honor, the Malthusian city of London's monarch, King Charles III, Trump is orchestrating the demise of his presidency. while increasing the danger of a nuclear World War III. This is why the vote today in Kentucky's 4th congressional district is being watched so closely. Now, not to be undone, demonstrating the desperation of President Trump and his Anglo-Zionist controllers to keep the pro-Zionist majority in the House of Representatives by purging Thomas Massey from the Congress. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth shows up in Kentucky with the Republican primary candidate Ed Gowron. I was watching some of that on the news this morning and I wanted to puke. The two appeared together at America First Works event in Hebron, Kentucky, to what appeared to be a small crowd. Then Hegseth opened up his speech with a disclaimer that he was campaigning as a private citizen for the lawyer in the audience. Well, the polls show him in the lead because President Trump has done everything he can to personally endorse Gowron. But the citizens of the 4th Congressional District are waking up. And I think they're beginning to see what's really going on here. So, more to talk about, but I think that will do it for the most part. Tomorrow is a health program, and a lot of things to take care of, in the sense of the coming need for your bodies to be whole, operational, and without pain, and full of energy, which is what we're committed to at the clinic. I have 4 new patients today to see. 4 of them. And so I need to take off here pretty quick and get to the clinic. But they're all taking advantage of that half-off deal. You need to call 801-523-1890. 801-523-1890 to make an appointment for a consultation. No cost, no charge consultation. There's no charge unless you decide you want me to take care of you. What have I been seeing lately? The common stuff: headaches, migraines, neck pain and stiffness, shoulder pain, low back pain, sciatica, long-term low back pain, long-term sciatica. And it just goes on and on and on until that spine is brought back into balance. Everything else is just a good idea. So I'm going to be switching over to, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now so I can get it saved. And I'll be switching over here in just a few seconds to Lowell, who's taking over the command of the K-Talk operation right now. So I'm going to say goodbye.